want to start off with pharma. So greed lies in the poisoning of America. Just a couple weeks ago, the president announced, I think it was at the memorial of Charlie Kirk, where there he's talking about tomorrow we're making a big announcement, me and Bobby Kennedy, and then they released ties of Tylenol to autism and don't take it. And then Tylenol retweet comes up from 2017. We don't recommend you taking Tylenol when you're pregnant, all this other stuff. This book, as you go through the history of it, I'm going to start off with this page 7. I'm going to read it to the audience, and I want you to go from there, okay? So page 7, until 1900, there was no national medical license law. In most states, anyone could call themselves a doctor and open a practice and treat patients. The lack of basic medical knowledge meant that there were few boundaries for promoting a drug. That was the case with the first inexpensive but powerful central nervous system stimulant called cocaine. It had been discovered by a German doctor student whose chemistry dissertation was about how he had isolated the pure alkaloid from coca leaves. He named the alkaloid cocaine, from the Latin ina, from it simply means from coca. Merck, one of the first firms to concentrate on cocaine, touted it in products for everything from numbing aesthetics to cure for ingestion and hemorrhoids. Even as an aid in eye surgery, it reduced bleeding by tightening blood vessels. Cocaine was officially the sanctioned remedy of the United States Hay Fever Association. The U.S. Surgeon General said cocaine was effective for treating depression, tobacco, and sold cigars laced with 225 milligrams of cocaine for soothing nerves, while dentists peddled cocaine infused for toothaches. A gram of cocaine cost an average of 25 cents at any druggist. The largest mail-order catalog of the era, Sears and Roebuck, sold a hypodermic syringe a Scottish doctor had invented. It only a few decades earlier, and a small amount of cocaine for $1.50. The bottom in cocaine-based remedies meant that over a 2-year span, folks, pay attention to this, Merck went from producing less than a pound of cocaine annually to 180,000 pounds a year. How far along have we come from cocaine being a drug the doctor used to today?
No, it's unbelievable because PBD, think about this. When you said Sears and Roebuck sold a little kit that you could use, that was the Amazon of its day. That was where everybody went. That was, so you were essentially going on the biggest retailer that you could find. They sold a packet that would make it easy. And cocaine is just one example. So this was the Wild West days. This was the days you said they knew very little about medicine and what was curing, but they did know when a stimulant worked, so they knew cocaine worked. And what really was the start of the rest of the pharmaceutical companies that we know today by the companies? By the way, a couple of German cousins in New York City called the Pfizers had a $2,500 loan and borrowed $1,000 from their family and set up a factory to make what? Morphine. Because during the Civil War, they found out there was a tremendous demand for morphine. Battlefield, people are suffering. They knew morphine helped kill pain. There's questions about quality, so the Pfizers get going. There's a guy called Edward Robinson Squibb. He's in the military. He knows that. He starts Squibb and Company. Why? To make morphine. You get the same thing from a fellow called Eli Lilly. He knew that there was bad morphine being sent to the front. He sends morphine. And you get it with Wellcome and Burroughs, Davies, all these companies that today are pharmaceutical companies. They get their start on an addictive product at a time when you could walk into a store and buy it. And the great thing is Bayer aspirin, we think about them. They had smart guys inside the lab. The Germans dominated the pharmaceutical company. And over a 5-year period, from 1898 to 1903, their scientists in their labs discovered 4 different drugs. The first one in 1898 is acetaminophen, what we call Tylenol. Okay, they came up with that. Pretty amazing. And then in 1899, they come up with aspirin, a wonder drug. In 1900, they come up with a better morphine. And they name it after the German word for heroic, heroin. They market it, they trademark heroin in the United States, and they sell it as a cure for morphine addiction. It's fantastic.
Stop it.
Yeah, no. I'm kidding you not. And it does, of course, cure for morphine addiction. You'll give up morphine, you'll go to heroin. They also sold it to be able, for babies, for cough. And then in 1903, at the end of this 5-year period, they came up with the first barbiturate, phenobarbital, which they also had. So now think of this. They've got Tylenol, they've got aspirin, they've got heroin, they've got phenobarbital, and they made the decision not to put one on the market because inside their laboratories, with laboratory rats, one of them was showing all types of harms. Guess which one? Tylenol. They did not put acetaminophen on the market. They marketed phenobarbital, no prescriptions required. They marketed heroin, and they ended up marketing aspirin. And what changed the whole bit, so you think, okay, so the United States, 1906, we passed a Food and Drug Act, Pure Food and Drug Act. That didn't stop drugs from being sold like heroin and cocaine. It just said you had to put on the label what was in the bottle. Before that, you could have an elixir and just say it's going to make you wonderful, strong, muscular. You used to work out at the gym, you used to work at Bally's or wherever else. Now you could take an elixir and go in there and you'd be Superman. You know what? Now they had to tell you on the label what was in there. But what really changed it was 1914. They passed an act, the Harrison Act, and they banned narcotic importation. And they really did to stop the Chinese from bringing in opium and all. But once they stopped the importation of drugs, then pharma went cold turkey. They had to say, oh, we can't sell any more morphine. We can't sell heroin. We can't do all of that. They had to look around for other drugs. They found one in insulin, the Canadian researchers found, but it's really not until World War II when penicillin comes around. It's an industry looking for a product. And this you'll like because you're such a business guy, that when Moody's starts to cover American industries for the first time around 1915, pharmaceuticals is not even a category. It's such a small industry that's not even listed. It's a subset of the chemical industry. So it doesn't become its own industry until near 1930. So we think of Big Pharma as this giant. It is. It's a multi-billion-dollar business. But just 100 years ago, it was nothing.
So 1915, Moody's comes out. By 1930, it's an industry. Prior to that, it's not seen as an industry.
It's seen as a subset of chemicals.
So by when did people start becoming licensed to practice, being a doctor, medicine?
So the states varied. There was no federal law, no Trump executive order that said everyone's got to have a doctor's degree tomorrow. So you'd start to see states license slowly the idea. And then, of course, once the states started to license, a group of very smart guys got together and said, hey, you know what? We should sort of be the doctors group, the AMA. Let's form a council that everybody has to get to, and we'll lobby the states together, and we'll go ahead and do it. So that really happens. But it's not until the 1930s, late 30s, that you get the first law from Congress that says you have to have a prescription for anything that is a narcotic-based drug. But you still didn't need prescriptions for anything else, which is really remarkable. And there's a little law passed, by the way, at the end of the 1930s, which is really interesting, the FDA. There are about 30 drugs that are in existence at this point. You don't even really have penicillin yet. And they passed a law that said, by the way, doctors, when they get their license, they're smart. And there aren't many drugs out there. So if a drug's approved for something, a doctor can prescribe it off-label for whatever they want. That made sense when there were like a dozen drugs. Now we have like 3,000 drugs. That law still exists. And half of all the prescriptions in the United States every year that are written off-label. Doctors decide they're going to use it for something else. So we think of the FDA process. You go through this multi-billion-dollar process to get approval. You get approved for a certain purpose, then a doctor can ignore it and use for whatever else. So doctors, for instance, take a drug that's used for the sexual castration of sex offenders, and they're prescribing it on the side for pediatric converting children and stopping puberty and blocking puberty. That's an off-label application of the drug. It's one of the greatest loopholes in the United States in the drug industry. And Botox, when Botox first started, it was actually for a sort of an eye situation where your muscle would not start twitching. That's what they got the original approval for. And then some doctors noticed, hey, it looks like it lessens the effects of wrinkles on faces. People started to prescribe that around the country. Allergan, who was the company who owned it, they didn't care. They were making more billions and billions of dollars from it. So, we think that the drugs that are being prescribed are safe for use, more or less.
Yeah, I want to come back to that puberty blocker here in a minute, but let's stay on this here. When did Merck realize cocaine is, when did cocaine become illegal in America? Where doctors couldn't prescribe it?
Doctors can't really prescribe cocaine from 1914 and on.
1914 and on. And what caused it? What changed?
The Harrison Act.
Yes, okay,
it blocks it across the board.
What happened for them to say you can't do it anymore?
Okay, so what happened is they weren't focused specifically on cocaine. They were focused on all of these, what I call narcotics and stimulants. However, what it meant is pharmaceutical companies are very, very, they don't just fold their hands up and say, oh my God, you don't let us prescribe cocaine anymore, so now we have to find another drug. They find ways to be able to put that same stimulant, methamphetamines or whatever else, into other drugs. So in World War II, we were giving tens and tens of thousands of bennies to pilots who were flying because we wanted them to be able to have long flights and never fall asleep when they were bombing Dresden or firebombing Tokyo or hitting the enemy lines. We wanted to make sure they weren't getting drowsy. The Germans were doing the same thing. And as a matter of fact, by the 1960s, the biggest, we all know about OxyContin and those drugs. In the 1960s, the drug of choice was diet clinics. People were giving out essentially what they called black beauties or real speed. It was all pharmaceutical based. Doctors, the same way in Broward, years ago, there used to be pill mills for the opioids. There were doctors' pills and diet centers back in the 1960s where women would go to lose weight and people would get it all officially the equivalent of cocaine, but in a different product having the same purpose for a different tool. They always find a way to remarket it.
Interesting. So I remember in the 80s and 90s, it was ephedrine. I don't know if you remember, ephedrine was a hot item. Wrestlers were taking it. Bodybuilders were taking it. It was, you're going to get cut up. And it was a product by, I don't know what it was. I'll remember the name of the video.
Yellow Jackets, or
it was GNC would sell this thing, Ripped Fuel. I think it was Ripped Fuel.
I remember that. I was going to a gym in New York, and although I have no size, I wanted to be ripped and cut up. And I do remember the GNC product. And ephedra was well, but ephedra fell into one of those great loopholes, which is supplements. So we have all of this regulation on drugs and what you can do, right? You have to pass these tests. But with supplements, you can sort of say whatever you want. It's the Wild West still. Mm-hmm. So you can have all of the Semarelin, all these items today that you go onto Instagram and you answer one ad, and the next thing you know, you've seen 16 different products that are claiming you're going to be smarter, better. In 2 minutes, your hair's going to grow. You're going to have less wrinkles. You're going to be alive and thinking like a 20-year-old when you're 90 years old. Those are supplements totally unregulated.
Got it. Okay, so yeah, because ephedrine was a super, super hot item, and you'd go to the gym, everyone's taking it. Wrestlers were taking it. It was a very, very hot item.
Hi, I'm Gerald Posner. I'm an investigative reporter. I've written 13 books about everything from chasing Nazi war criminals to the heroin trade to 9/11 to Saudis to fundamentalists and to the drug industry and to money inside the Vatican. You can ask me just about everything on my next. Reach out to me and talk to me about 9/11, find out what's happening in terms of the Epstein files. If you want to find out what's happened in the recent Trump assassination attempt by crooks, I'm looking into that as well. I've got a whole series of things, including the transgender industry on children, that are on my hot list, so send me some questions.
If you enjoyed this video, you want to watch more videos like this, click here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click here.